Hello everyone, my name is Arwen, and I made a super cool animated short film. It's called Alterous, and it's about alterous attraction, which is the feeling of being drawn to someone in a way that isn't romantic but is not exactly normal friend feelings. The film is on this channel. If you haven't watched it, you should, besides the fact that it's really good and it's awesome. It'll make this video make a lot more sense if you know what I'm talking about. I'm gonna talk about how I made the film because I did it entirely myself, entirely for free, with very little experience doing this sort of thing. So, if you have an idea that you want to turn into a short film, but you don't know where to start, maybe this could help a bit, I'm going to go over the entire process from start to finish, over some footage of me drawing June and Ben from Alterous. Step 1. The idea. So, I actually got the idea for Alterous from watching a different short film about alterous attraction. It's called Mesh by Artemis Munoz, and I really like the film, and it got me thinking about my personal experience with alterous attraction as an aloe-ace autistic person. I opened up a page in my notes app and just started brainstorming. I knew I wanted it to be, about my experience with alterous attraction in general, but I also primarily drew inspiration from one person who isn't in my life anymore, but when they were, I felt a similar way to them as the characters in the film feel towards each other. I thought about how I struggled to identify my feelings for the person, and I had a lot of anxiety about categorizing them, but eventually I just thought, I love them, and my love for them doesn't need to fit into the boxes that our society made up for describing love. I kind of think of the term alterous attraction as similar to the term non-binary, in the sense that non-binary isn't just a third gender to add to the pre-existing list of male and female. It represents the full spectrum between those two, around those two, and separate to those two. Alterous attraction isn't just one other way to feel about someone besides platonic or romantic, it's a whole spectrum. This got me thinking about colors, how you can mix two colors together to get a third color, but the color spectrum doesn't just exist of those three colors. That's why I chose the color palette of Alterous to be yellow, blue, green, and purple. I decided that yellow was going to represent platonic feelings and platonic interactions, blue was going to represent romantic feelings and romantic interactions, and green and purple were going to represent alterous attraction because green is a mix of those two and purple is an entirely separate color. I wanted the main points of the film to be that the main character is thinking about his friend while trying to fall asleep, and in his head he's making up platonic and romantic scenarios represented by yellow and blue to see what feels right. He approaches these scenarios in a very analytical way. He eventually goes to sleep, and that's when he realizes that he doesn't have to categorize his feelings. All of these yellow and blue scenarios mixed together into a green relationship. He wakes up and his friend comes over and their feelings are communicated to each other. From there I worked out details that it's the main character's birthday, so his friend comes over to make a cake, and the cake symbolizes their relationship, and all the ingredients they put into the cake have their specific feelings for each other on them, showing how they can build a completely unique relationship born out of their own unique feelings. I wrote a kind of script, all the events that I wanted to happen and the minimal dialogue that happens, and then I got started on step 2. Step 2. Planning. There was a lot to be done before I could start animating. I started with character designs, which I did all in Procreate. I drew what the characters were looking like in my head, gave them names, June and Ben. And then I made edits to their designs to make more sense, look better, and be easier to animate until I was happy with them. I also planned, different outfits when that was applicable, and I planned what some reoccurring objects were going to look like the birthday card and the polar bear plushie. Then I worked out the exact color palette. I'll put my color palette planning page on the screen right now. I had to have 4 separate color palettes. One for just normal lighting in the real world, one for when it's nighttime and dark in the real world, one for romantic scenarios in June's head, and one for platonic scenarios in June's head. Once that was done, I did character turnarounds. This was gonna make it so much easier to animate them later because I could literally just open my iPad and see what they look like from every angle. Once I did the character turnarounds, I did the storyboard. The point of a storyboard is So once you go to animate, you know the exact composition of every shot, and you don't have to redo a whole lot of work if you don't like the composition. A storyboard can be super sketchy and ugly. It's literally just so you know what you're doing. It does not have to be a piece of art in itself. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be super quick, so it's easy for you to just like go back and erase panels that you don't like. You can literally use stick figures in your storyboard if that'll get the idea of what's going on across to future you well enough. Anyway, this is my storyboard. It's on the screen, editing me do this. Yeah, once I had this done, it was time to animate. Step 3, animating. Unsurprisingly, this is the part that took the longest. It was absolutely ridiculous of me to finish this whole film in a month. Those other steps took like 5 days, so really I animated an over 3-minute long short film in a bit over 3 weeks. I do not recommend doing this to yourself. I worked on this every day for 3 weeks, into the wee hours of the night. This project consumed my whole brain. I kept track of how many hours of animating I did. I believe it added up to 65 total. That is 21 hours of work a week, and that's on top of being a full-time college student. It was absolutely ridiculous. I did this because Alterous became like a super intense hyperfixation. Like, I couldn't sleep at night because I was thinking about the film, so I would get out of bed and keep animating until like 4 AM several nights. Again, I do not recommend. With that out of the way, I will tell you my animation process. This is like the one bit that I actually have some experience in. I'm an animation major, but I just finished my first year of college and I've just been getting like the prerequisites out of the way. I animated literally one thing for a class this whole year, but I did learn a lot of the fundamentals. I'm not going to teach you the fundamentals because there are people that are way more qualified to do that than me. Just Google the 12 principles of animation and that's like a pretty good starting point. Also, shout out to my friend Koi, who's way better at animation than me. I showed them the work in progress of this film a bunch of times and they gave me really helpful critique on like timing and stuff. I animated the whole film in Krita. It's a free software on the computer that's great for digital illustration and has great basic animation capabilities too. 10 out of 10, would recommend. I started by sketching the keyframes, and by the way, this whole film is in 12 frames per second because I don't mind choppy animation and I wanted less work. Once I had the keyframes sketched for a movement, I'd either sketch or use the transform tool to make the in-between frames. Once the whole thing was sketched, I would do the line art. I had at least 2 line art layers, sometimes 3 or 4. I always had the background's line art on a separate layer so I could manipulate the moving line art parts without worrying about it. And if I had overlapping moving bits in a shot, then I would create separate line art layers. I would animate the movements individually and then erase the overlapping bits of the line art. For color, I turned the background to a gray color so that wasn't too close to any of the gray colors that I was using so I could see what I was doing. And Krita has this wonderful tool that where you can, with the fill bucket, where you can reference all the layers and expand the selection by a few pixels to get rid of the ant trails. I had my color planning document from earlier opened in another Krita tab so I could color drop directly from it. So I'd fill in the foreground colors first with the background's line art layer off so it's not referenced, then I'd turn off all the foreground layers and fill in the background. Then I'd add details over top like the vignettes and the dialogue I did on the screen and not spoken out loud, and then the scene was done, and I just did that for all the scenes. And then I moved on to editing. Step 4, editing and sound. I did all the editing in VSDC, which is the same editing program I use for YouTube. I put all the scenes that I exported from Krita in order in there. I did little tweaks like adding freeze frames where scenes changed too quick and then added a title screen in the credits. Then came the long process of adding all of the music and sound effects. I decided to make my life harder and record all of the music and sound effects myself. I play guitar, so this was possible for me. I kind of just went through the film and made up a simple guitar melody for each part that fit the vibes. Then I watched it and made a list of every single sound effect that needed to happen, and I went through my house recording the various sound effects with a microphone, either with the actual objects that were making the sounds in the film or objects that were like close enough. For example, in the scene where, June's, like, mind's eye creature is, like, pouring the beakers into each other, I, like, just grabbed 2 glasses of water and poured the water right by the microphone. There were, like, 2 sounds that I couldn't find things around the house to make the sounds, so I got royalty-free sound effects from them off the YouTube audio library. I lined them all up with the animation in VSDC, edited the volume and stuff, and then used the fancy feature in VSDC where it, like, evens out all the audio so you don't have, like, super loud bits and super quiet bits, and then that was basically it. Yeah, so that's how Alterous came into existence. If you are considering making an animated short film, you should do it. I'm just a guy who draws pictures, and I did it, so you probably can too. I am so happy I made Alterous. A few times during the process I had anxiety that I was going to release it to the world and no one would really get it or relate, but I've gotten a bunch of comments from people saying they feel represented, and that's really awesome. Like, that is one of the things that I wanted to come out of this film besides just, like, explaining my experience. You probably have a story that only you can tell in the way that you want it to be told. Anyway, I hope you liked the drawing, I hope this was helpful or at least an interesting insight into my process. Have a good day, I will see you later.